Produced by Podcast Architects.
Welcome back to The Path Forward, and we have another exciting guest, Natalie Smolinski. She has a very interesting story and some very unique perspectives on blockchain and where it's going.
Yes, Natalie is the chairman of the board of the Texas Blockchain Council. We are at their event this evening, and it's going to be an exciting conversation. We had a lot of fun with this one.
Yes, we had an opportunity to listen to her speak to the crowd, and very passionate about the blockchain space, and excited to get to meet her.
Yeah, she talks a little bit about the primary uses of blockchain. You know, I think a lot of it is not well understood, and she said it kind of coalesces into the categories of money and identity, which was helpful for me even.
Well, absolutely. I don't know what I'm doing either. The more we learn, the better off we'll be. So this is going to be a good one.
All right, let's get into it.
Well, welcome to The Path Forward, Natalie. Pleasure to have you today.
It's great to be here.
And you've already met my co-host, Ben Wiggins.
Unfortunately for you.
Yeah, and unfortunately for me, but you get to leave and be done with us after this.
Whereas Rick has to keep hanging out.
Yes, and vice versa too.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved with the Texas blockchain, but also from your beginnings, your parents.
Yeah, so, we were chatting about this a little earlier. One of the reasons that I was inspired by the mission of the Texas Blockchain Council is because, my parents immigrated to Texas from a communist country, and they were both software engineers, and they just didn't feel like they had the kinds of opportunities in Poland in the early 80s that they wanted for their life and for their children. And so I was, the first person in my family to be born in the United States. I was born right here in Dallas, grew up here. And I have to say, my parents placed a pretty big, risky bet on this state. And I think it paid off really well. And so I want to give back, to Texas, some of the things that Texas has given to me.
Absolutely. And Texas is the best country in the United States.
100%.
And so Smolinski is Polish, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Okay. And so did they coerce you, push you to the software type of industry?
Not at all. In fact, when I was growing up, I was very much of the point of view that I was never going to go into business. I was going to be an anthropologist. And that was what I spent my early 20s doing. So I actually did field work in Egypt and Poland. I did a PhD in the social sciences. But it became, very apparent to me that there were a lot of structural issues with higher education in the United States. When you have highly educated professionals who, have really no hope of a tenure track position. Something like 85% of all teaching positions now at the university level are adjuncts, which are, if you're lucky, poverty line level wages. And so I kind of saw a very bleak future, candidly, professionally in higher education. And that convinced me to look for another path. Also because candidly in my doctoral program, my committee did not like my project. They did not understand it. They did not feel that I was citing the right people and, doing the right political work to assure that I would be accepted into the inner circles. And so
what was the subject matter? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I was doing a dissertation on sanctity, actually. So I was an anthropologist of religion, and I was looking at sanctity as both a category of analysis and a category of practice. So how ordinary people understand it, and then how social scientists like anthropologists have written about it. And so I got into not only anthropological literature, but psychoanalysis and phenomenology and science of the subject. So these were very frontier kind of bleeding edge areas. And I was basically told in no uncertain terms that I either needed to change my entire project or I could GTFO. So
wow.
I went into business and
On one level, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like that would be something people would really care about. What was their excuse for telling you this is an unacceptable thing to wonder about?
Well, every discipline has an orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And by orthodoxy, I mean a kind of consensus reality that everyone agrees is, this is the mapped kind of universe of analysis. And then outside of that, there be dragons. And so the people who tend to venture outside of that are either like crazy balls or like truly onto something, but in a way that their colleagues may not be able to see. And so I basically decided that my project was more important to me than, finishing at any particular institution. I continued to work on that. I actually found another home for it, completed my PhD several years later, and continue to work as an independent scholar. I'm working on a book right now. I've, been publishing for many years, but I transitioned, into business first through advertising marketing as a brand planner, and then into software. So I was doing software sales and implementation at this education technology company.
Do tell.
Yes, which was making admission systems, applicant tracking systems for higher education, but also for granting programs, artist residencies, the NASA Hubble Space Telescope, like any organization that needed to process and filter applications.
Yeah.
So one of our customers at the time was MIT, because MIT had recently broadened their undergraduate admissions process to include maker portfolios. They said, we don't just want to see, your standardized test scores and the information that the standard application asks for. We want to see project-based learning.
Right.
Like, what can you do?
Yeah.
So they were using our software to submit these maker portfolios. Mm-hmm. And the admissions office came to us and said, candidly, we get like tens of thousands of applicants every year from all over the world. It can be a real challenge figuring out whose papers are real and which ones are forged or fake. There's a lot of fraud in academic credentials worldwide. And so we got to thinking and we were like, well, hey, there's this new technology called a blockchain. And that is basically like this independent digital notary.
Right.
And in the same way that you can use it to transfer currency from point A to point B, you can use it to, you can piggyback all sorts of claims on top of those transactions and then use it to verify those claims. So we collaborated with MIT to build the very first implementation of what later came to be called verifiable credentials. So we called it Block Certs. We open sourced it in 2016 under an MIT free and open source software license. It's still out there. Anybody can use it to build their own applications to issue blockchain anchored digital records. And in addition to the open source work, we also built a commercial product for universities to issue digital diplomas and transcripts in this way. So MIT has actually been using our software since 2017 to issue digital diplomas. Wow. So have many other universities around the world. The entire country of Malta is using the system for diplomas and transcripts and even professional licenses like teaching licenses and licenses to practice law and things like that. So we got quite a bit of commercial traction for this and actually spun out this blockchain credentialing business from the edtech business. And I went with this blockchain business as the founding business development executive. So, startup, we're a small team. Yeah. I was wearing multiple hats. So I was doing everything from, thought leadership, like market making, creating demand for a category of thing that nobody had in their budgets. Yes. Like this was not part of anybody's.
People didn't know that they needed it, didn't know that they wanted it.
Right, yeah. Exactly.
We don't know anything about what that's
like. So I basically sourced the accounts, nurtured the accounts, closed the accounts. And then in the early days, I also implemented the software and did all of the services. Eventually, I built out a team. And then that company was bought last year by Highland, which is a major enterprise content services provider. So they, anything you want to do with documents or videos or images, like workflows, case management, they got you. So they liked the fact that this was basically a verifiable documents capability that they could add to their stack. Mm-hmm. I'm still with them, so I still lead business development for Highland's blockchain products. But then, I've also helped launch this Texas Blockchain Council thing because one of the major obstacles I kept encountering in the field as I was trying to sell this was like, so what's the regulatory, standpoint on all of this, right, particularly in the digital identity space? Like, so how do we know this is like in line with laws and regulations? And
sure.
So there was a lot of policy work that I just found myself doing as a result of my job. So I figured it would be best to just join forces with other companies doing the same stuff and get some real results.
Yep. So you're building the guardrails kind of as the product is going out almost.
Right. Exactly.
And having to inform your clients of how this lines up with current regulations. Because I would think that the regulations haven't caught up to the technology, which is usually the case.
Right. That's exactly right. So, law is a trailing indicator. It's generally
always.
It's not a leading indicator. Yeah. And that's not to, throw shade on law. Yeah. It's that
it takes time. That process takes time.
Law is a expression of social consensus, and social consensus takes time to form.
Right. Yeah. It has to react to what is happening.
Exactly.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I was wondering where my MIT application went because that solid 2.7 was not forged, by the way. So
you mean this application?
Yeah. They probably threw that paper airplane right into the trash. One of the robots threw it right into the trash at MIT. So
yeah,
very interesting. And so now in terms of the crypto space, because what I find very interesting is I have yet to meet anyone that's talked about the finance piece of it. These are all like, even with Lee today, it's all practical application of how it's going to make business and infrastructure quicker, better, safer, which is really not the message. Like if you just were to YouTube anything, it's all the coins and
meme
the tokens and the money.
Shiba.
And that's where I think some of the message gets lost because it's about the technology and the infrastructure and what is going to be the future use cases for it.
Right.
Which is my interest, is because kids need to know what that's going to look like. It's going to affect them and hopefully be able to get them jobs if they're familiar, they know how to do it, they understand it, they can code it, whatever the case. So very interesting perspective. I'll shut up now, but I just thought that was.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up how there are really two major universes of use cases right now for blockchain technology: money and identity. Some people would say things like provenance and supply chain, but I would actually subsume that under identity, because what you're doing is you're in effect tracking the movement of a unique entity through a SKU. And you have to validate that, this vial of a vaccine was actually produced or sourced at this factory and it's gone through, X, Y, and Z checkpoints and now it's here. And all of that requires a really sophisticated ability to track identifiers through supply chain. So one of our really cool new startups coming out of Austin is called Transmute, and they're basically using the new verifiable credentials standards to help with all manner of shipping and logistics. Which, as we've seen over the past year, that's an industry that could use some
updating.
Some updating, yeah.
So let me ask you this. So selfishly, my son was bit by a rattlesnake a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And the hospital stay and the mounting bills. And there's I'm the guy that's going to read every single thing and see what is it that you're giving me? Why are you giving me this? Did you actually perform this? So I would think in the hospital industry for billing, coding, transparency on what that looks like.
Correct.
Is that already in use, or is that something that is coming in your estimation?
I think it's coming. And this is one of the things I've actually been working on in partnership with a consortium of healthcare nonprofit associations like the Federation of State Medical Boards, the Accreditation Council on Graduate Medical Education, the AMA, the American Board of Medical Specialties, NAMS, National Association of Medical Staff Services. We're actually in the midst of producing a report with some recommendations around blockchain anchored technology standards for clinician credentialing. Particularly now that things like telemedicine are becoming widespread.
Sure.
How do you know that the person on the other side of your FaceTime is really a licensed physician?
Yeah, could just be some guy in a coat with the headphones on.
Exactly.
Saying, I'll give you some amoxicillin for that.
Exactly. Or a first responder, showing up
absolutely.
to treat you on site. So we're going to need to verify this type of information very quickly in life or death situations. And we just can't do that using the techniques that are in practice today.
Very interesting. Yeah, I thought about that would revolutionize. I bet it would be scary for some industries.
Yes.
Because what might you find if you were all of a sudden switched to extreme accuracy where there may not have been that microscope on certain industries in the past?
Right. Right.
What might you find in that, particularly medical billing?
I'm just disappointed that my moonlight career as a hypnotherapist is about
You don't really need a license for that anyway, do you?
Ventriloquist?
Why do you ask, Richard?
Yes. I've got a lot of friends in higher ed because I'm constantly pushing on them we've got to get more aligned. We've got to make it more usable. We've got to have skills and trades that are going to evolve and give kids an opportunity to earn.
Yes.
If we don't do that, all we're giving them is debt. There is a problem there. Right.
Right.
So it moves very slowly, as you well know. But anyway, Austin College, or talk to us about that. What is
University of Austin?
University of Austin.
Yeah. So this was just announced on Monday this week, and it's a really interesting project. So it's being founded by a consortium of academics. The president was formerly the president of St. John's College, a very well-known small liberal arts institution. Joe Lonsdale, who founded Palantir and is now a venture capitalist based out of Austin. He's a founder. Former Harvard President Larry Summers is one of the founding members. There are many other academics who have signed on who basically, have been canceled by either their administration or student communities on campus, and have kind of come to the determination that they feel like there's something broken about American higher education. And obviously not everyone agrees with that.
Sure.
So it's a controversial claim, but nevertheless, it's attracted a lot of attention because, what they're claiming is that there needs to be a space of free inquiry where people are safe to make mistakes, to be provisional, to say things that they later don't agree with or retract, all in the pursuit of truth. So they see the University of Austin as a new kind of institution that's actually modeled on what the ancient university was. That's why they're insisting that this is going to be in person. It's going to be on campus. They're in the process of procuring land right now. They're going to start small, with small cohorts, scale up from there, minimize the administrative burden. I saw an article today saying that, Yale University has a 1-to-1 ratio between students and administrators.
Oh, wow.
Like the administrative bloat on many campuses is so high that's what's contributing to these like skyrocketing tuition costs. So they're basically trying to come up with an economic model that's going to make this sustainable long term. And because people running this organization have experience actually, founding and building businesses, they may very well succeed.
That's awesome. I've always felt like colleges, just like public ed, should be held to the standard of what are the kids doing when they leave you?
Right.
What are they producing? How are they functioning?
Exactly.
Because that's got to be some part of the measure. So if you graduate from college and you're unemployable and you have debt and there's not a viable workspace for you, then what did we accomplish in those 4 to 5, 6 years?
Right.
And I know that's hard to do because you typically don't do what you went to college for. You go out and find something else. Go ahead, Ben, you had a thought.
Well, here's the rub. What has faculty interest been like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, crazy. Obviously, the U.S. higher education market right now, there is an oversupply of faculty for a very small number of jobs. So that's the background. But, within the first 24 hours of announcing the University of Austin, they had over 1,000 faculty applications to teach there, which is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, that's high interest, I would say.
Yeah.
Within 24 hours, it was 40 applications an hour. Am I right? Is my math right?
Hey, 2.7, my friend.
Oh,
so
you're rolling in.
Yeah. I'll leave the mathematicians to that. Yeah.
But yeah, it's very impressive. And I would assume that, just given the political lingo at work here, I would assume that a lot of the administration, a lot of the faculty who are interested are more of a conservative political bent. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So, Niall Ferguson is one of the founders of this university, and he recently wrote an article for Bloomberg spelling out the rationale for it. Part of his rationale was just the overwhelming preponderance of Democrat versus Republican leaning faculty in the humanities and social sciences across the U.S. So, whether it's English or anthropology or, sociology, like faculty just lean overwhelmingly Democratic. So definitely some of the founders are concerned about that and they want to see more Republican or conservative representation in faculty. I think for others though, because this is a fairly diverse group in terms of their own political points of view. Not all of them would identify as conservative. And so it's more, I think, about just, at least in theory, creating a safe space, funny enough,
ironically,
for disagreeing points of view to be aired and debated in an environment where, people aren't immediately castigated, morally as somehow deficient for whatever it is they're coming to the table with.
The irony in all of this to me, which I agree, and academia at large it tends to run, I think, more left these days, but that hasn't always been true.
No,
higher education, as recently as probably the early 60s, I don't, maybe Vietnam was where things started to turn. I don't know what happened in the political climb, but as early as, as recently as the early 60s, academia was very conservative.
Right. And Ferguson actually makes this point in his article. He's like, the way things are today is not the way things have been or the way things will be in the future necessarily. We're just not going to wait around, for the world to change.
We're going to swing.
Yeah, we're going to take action.
Right.
I have a solution for getting back to the point where people can have a disagreement and still have leave as friends or leave. I see your point. And I don't agree, but
is it called Reddit?
No, it's not. Anytime there's a debate, including presidential debate, right? After the debate, after the discussion, whatever, you've got to play a game of Twister because you cannot be mad at somebody when you are feeling goofy and exposed. Like you quickly bond because now all of a sudden you're both embarrassed. I think that's the way to go. So
I like this idea.
You just draw out the Twister mat. It's all right, guys. Appreciate your points of view. All right, let's spin the dial right here. Red foot.
Right hand red.
Yeah, red foot.
It's the title of this episode. Right hand red.
Yeah,
right foot red.
No, somebody would think that we're conservative because it's red, so it would have to be yellow.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What's it? There's got to be some bad signaling there. I don't know what it is, but
no. what else do you want to get out there? Are there any other messages that we didn't cover that you want to share?
Well, I think on the topic of education more broadly, we're in an era where education is being redefined, where, people are increasingly moving toward a lifelong learner model, as opposed to, waiting on, let's say, a 2-year or a 4-year degree or, a high school diploma to be kind of the be all and end all of their education.
Right.
Everyone's constantly learning.
Have to.
Right. And so the question then becomes for educators, how do we convey the value of the education that we are offering? And there's a big difference between education that is valued in terms of getting a job or vocational education and the kind of character formation and citizenship development that has been the mission of the university. And so there's this, I would say, productive and necessary tension between those two objectives of education. That some of the most successful startup founders, entrepreneurs, and leaders majored in topics like philosophy or social sciences, like things that wouldn't necessarily lead directly to employment, any particular type of employment.
Right.
But they had the ability to transfer their generalized ability to learn into any area that they put their mind to. And so often, when I talk to young people who are looking for advice as to how to structure an education, I really like the approach of a problem-based approach. Like, is there a problem in the world that you're really passionate about that you want to help solve? That's going to take you down, an educational path that's often interdisciplinary, but that's fascinating because it'll involve your whole person. And the character of who you become along that road often contributes as much to your capacity for success as any particular content or knowledge you absorb.
That's a great point. The learning of who you are along the way.
Right.
Let me push back on this a little bit, because I think that is a great way for a really talented person to go succeed.
Yes.
But I think that there is a certain floor on your capabilities in terms of what kind of person can take that kind of approach successfully, because there are no rules. And if you are the type of person who can see the opportunity and take yourself to the opportunity, or see the problem and take yourself over or around or through the problem, great. Like, if you have a capacity for the founder mentality stuff, for learning, for recruiting new skills as needed, for delivering results despite politics, all of those things, if you can do that, this is a great way to learn. Yeah. If you can't do all of that, I'm not sure that this doesn't put you at the edge of a precipice. Right. Because this is a type of learning approach that I think has much less of a safety net. Yes. Does that make sense?
That's an excellent point. And it gets at the question of when education truly begins. I think all children, young children, have the capacity for that kind of passionate, self-directed learning. In fact, that's the whole thesis behind, Montessori schools for the youngest ages. However, most children are not privileged enough to be raised in environments where that kind of thinking and learning is nurtured. So, it tends to be either extraordinarily rote education, disciplinary education, or just like basically glorified daycare, in contexts where the parents need to work to survive economically. And so somebody has to be looking after children, and the quality may or may not be there. And so, by the time children socialized under those conditions are then asked to pick a direction, it can become extraordinarily difficult. And what's interesting is we've been seeing this not just at, the lower ends of achievement, which is how I think many typically think about this, but at the higher ends too, where you have extremely rote tracking of you need to start SAT prep, in kindergarten, and you need to start really preparing for X, Y, and Z extracurriculars that you're going to do to pad your resume to get into the right programs super, super early. And so you have, what former Yale professor William Dedashevich has referred to as excellent sheep, is these students who get into these prestigious institutions, but are completely lack executive function. Like they're not able to direct their own learning. They want to be told what to do.
Wonderful employees.
Yes, exactly. So it happens at all scales of the socioeconomic spectrum. And I think our challenge as a civilization is how to create the containers that are structured enough to where progress is being made, but not so structured that they're cutting off, the child's passion and creativity.
I think the only way to do that is for kids to experience it as they matriculate through the educational system.
Yeah.
If you wait till they graduate, it's mostly too late, because if you don't see it at home or you don't see it within the school system,
right,
when are you going to see the examples of, oh, that's how you do this, or that's how you interact? And I'll go back and say, until businesses and education partner in a way that's symbiotic, that you cannot separate them, you'll never have that those kids that are leaving that are truly prepared to innovate, to think on their feet, to create, to socialize, and kind of have a vision for it. Because how do you learn that?
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't magically, appear. You've got to see it in action, and you've got to make some mistakes along the way. And we do a great job in public education, I believe, for the most part. But you can't replicate those experiences with a mentor on the job in a facility that's what they're going to be walking into, and see it in real time. Right? You learn. To me, you not only have to hear it and see it, but you also have to do it. Kind of like with crypto, right? As soon as I figured out enough of it, I was like, all right, I'm going to have to lose some money so I figured this out, right? With all because it's this code, and I was nervous about, all right, is this money really going to go here? And if I send this long, I'm copied it to the clipboard. Is it the right code? Like, we're writing 20 digits down.
Right,
it's scary for me, right?
Yeah.
But once I did it, and I said, oh, this is how this works. Oh, this is... you've got to do it. You've got to do it. You've got to see it. And then you've got to go ask experts like yourself and Lee about, help me with this.
Yeah.
Help me understand what the space is. What do I need to be thinking about?
Yeah.
And kids can handle that. We think that they can't, but they absolutely can.
Yeah.
There's enough kids that have figured out a way to survive at a very young age because of their circumstances. They know how to innovate.
Yep.
They know how to create.
Yep. Absolutely.
They know how to survive. We don't give them the credit for that. So therefore, no, you're not ready. No, you're not ready. Well, when are they ready?
Right. Exactly.
And there's a benefit to everyone when there's partnerships like that. It's a lot of red tape and it's hard to do, but guess what? What better time than now? You've got a bunch of people, Elon Musk and these other people. It's like, those are the old rules, and we're just going to kind of rewrite this as what we need, because the time is now. So I absolutely think it can be done. It just takes the right people pushing the buttons to make it happen.
That's right. Well, there's certainly a lot of button pushing happening.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt. What else? Anything else that we want to cover or discuss? We tried to keep it short, but was very interested in everything you're saying.
No.
So
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
what do you do in your free time?
Oh, well.
Don't say code or like you finish your second dissertation. Don't say that. Like,
actually,
for fun.
I am working on a book. But when I'm truly enjoying some downtime, I'm just like everybody else. I love a good movie, a good cocktail, a good pizza.
Nice.
So some things are like human universal.
Yeah, it's a Dallas Cowboys game.
Yeah.
It is what it is. We're in Dallas, so
indeed.
When in Rome, again.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can't think of anything else.
No, I think that was a great episode. Natalie, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys.
Very much enjoyed it. Thank you for having us to the event, and everybody's just been wonderful. So
really we'll hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, I went to the Houston meetup, and I'm trying to get Ben to tag along next time there's one close to College Station. So very excited.
Great.
Well, I've been blown away twice in one day. First by Lee, and then Natalie sharing her story and all of the great things she's a part of and kind of her rise within this blockchain industry. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah, really compelling to hear about her family's background and what the decision that her parents made and how Texas, the state of Texas, has kind of rewarded that decision and her desire to give back.
We can almost forgive her for being a Dallas Cowboys fan, but there are some definitely exciting things happening with the Texas Blockchain Council, and Natalie's a big part of that. So very happy we had her on today.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the discussion around education and how it plays, the innovation in the blockchain space and, how the way that she thinks about the educational process. I thought some of the story was, it kind of tugged at my heartstrings a little bit to hear about how she was kind of muscled out of her place in the educational space and what she's done with that since then.
Yeah, definitely a person with grit and determination, and that's really paying off a big dividend with what she's been able to do with some of the companies she's worked for and founded. So kudos to her.
Yeah, and thanks to her as well. We appreciate Natalie appearing on the show with us. To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. We have more content for you over here at the Path Forward channel. Make sure to like and subscribe, and leave us a comment if you have a moment. Let us know what you'd like to see more of, what we could be doing better, what you'd like to see less of. We're looking forward to hearing from you.